Is welcome our next guest up, Representative Byron Donald from Florida, for our next fireside chat. So let's welcome him up. And at the culmination of this fireside chat, we'll open it back up to questions. If you have the Wahova app, please download it so that you can put questions in the app as well, and we'll take from there. I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
All right. Byron is the first of the guests I haven't met before. So that's good. We're just gonna go at it. Where'd you grow up?
Let me get my situation. Brooklyn, New York.
No way.
Yeah, I'm a Brooklyn kid.
Fellow New Yorker.
Where at?
Tribeca.
All right, that's cool. It's trendy.
Trendy.
I'm Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Crown Heights. How'd you get to Florida?
College. So after high school, I went to FAMU. Go Rattlers. Went to FAMU. Also went to Florida State. So I went to both places. You went to FAMU? Yeah, the highest of Seven Hills. I get it. So it was a great time. There I studied finance. Finance was my major. Truth be told, I changed my major 4 times. I was on the 6-year plan. College was interesting, but basically it was finance, marketing. That's what I ended up graduating with, and went into the business world.
How'd you get to politics?
Oh man, listen.
Why just stay in Florida? Why'd you stay in Florida
one.
instead of coming back to New York City?
Well, I'm gonna deal with Florida first, and politics. When I graduated college, it was 2002. 9/11 had just happened, obviously. So the job market pre 9/11 was in New York was one of the most robust in the country. So my plan was to go back home and just get started in the finance world. Well, obviously, we all know what happened, in New York after 9/11. So my choices were, do I stay in Florida and try to find a place to get started, or do I go back home and try to fight it out, with everybody else that now has a degree that just lost their job because the economy went into a recession. So my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, she had moved to Bonita Springs, which is Southwest Florida, and I went down there to visit. And in the visit, everybody was old. Like in the area, everybody was old, and there was nothing but banks and brokerage houses. And I was like, man, everybody's old, but there's a bunch of banks and brokerage houses here. Maybe I should come here and get started. And that was actually ended up being a great decision, because the truth was you had a lot of professionals who were much longer in their career, but there wasn't a young workforce. So I was able to go there, get started, find, my pathway through commercial banking first, and so on and so forth.
How'd you find your first mentor down there?
My first mentor, he's since passed away, God rest his soul. He was a dude from Mississippi. He was a senior loan officer at Bank of America, and he came to work at the community bank I was working in. At the time, I was a commercial credit analyst, and I was a credit officer for my community bank at the time. And, he was a Mississippi guy, so he always tell me like great advice. One of the best advice he ever gave me was, he would say, Byron, you're real smart, but let me just tell you something. You want to get where you want to get to by 40, because 40 is the time when you start really making your money. And he, actually, you know what? Well, I'm in Congress. I ain't really making no money, so we might have to reevaluate some things. But the truth of the matter is that his advice was sage for me, because in the way economies and careers kind of evolve, unless you're an entrepreneur, you're going on an entrepreneurial path, or even really with entrepreneurism, if you kind of have the catalyst of what your financial environment for yourself and your family is really catalyzed by 40. In 40, 50, and 60, that's when you really reap the financial benefits of the work you put in 20 and 30. So it was actually really good advice.
And what got you into Congress? Like, why?
So,
for God's sakes.
Now, what happened there was, I had left banking in 2007 because I was forecasting recessions. We all know what happened in 2008. So I went and worked for an insurance firm. We were dealing with international insurance. It was a $4 billion portfolio that I was managing. And we had international clients. They were freaking out about what was happening in the financial world here in the United States. My job, being the guy with the economics background and the finance background, was to report back to our clients why they should keep their money with us, because, they pull the investment, this whole thing's over. So the pressure was on. Through all my research, the last thing I had to do was figure out what Congress's response was. So I turned on, for the first time in my life, I turned on C-SPAN. Like, I was an apolitical person. That's who I was. Like, growing up, we didn't really care about politics. We don't talk about politics. You know, like, you just kind of go vote. You look at a candidate here or there for about 10 minutes, make a decision, move on with your life. That's how most people look at politics, truth be told. So I had to watch a congressional hearing. And when I watched it, I was like really upset because I was like, what are they talking about? Like, these guys are talking about things that are not happening in the economic world, because I was living in the economic and the finance world. I was doing the work. And what they're saying on Capitol Hill is not what's happening in the real world. And even the way they frame their questions and the way they do their speeches, I was like, man, this is a joke. Who are these people? How'd they get elected? Why are they so important? And that was kind of the spark. And from there, I just really did a lot of self-discovery. You know, I read everything. I read stuff from like The Law by Frederick Bastiat. I read John Locke. I read Montesquieu. I didn't really like cable news because cable news is real surface. And I do a lot of cable news interviews, but it's real surface stuff. They talk about hot button things to get you agitated or get you emotional. They don't really drill into the issues and really think through the issues. And so what I started doing, just because I'm curious like that, I started reading books on political philosophy. And, you know, kind of through that work, that's kind of how I found politics.
What high school did you go to in Brooklyn?
Nazareth High School, Kingsman,
All right.
East Flatbush.
My guy Mel, the music guy I was talking about, he's a Flatbush guy.
Yeah. Listen, Brooklyn's fun, man. You know what it is about growing up in Brooklyn? You have to really be able to judge and read people, like at a moment's notice. So, like, friends of mine from back home or even from college, they're like, man, how are you in politics, man? How do you deal with this? Like, what did you have to learn? I said, honestly, growing up in the streets taught me more about how to deal in politics than anything else, because you got to be able to see around the corner. You got to read people real fast. Not everybody is for you. You got to understand that. And you still have to hustle. You have to grind. Like, nobody's giving you anything. And so you really have to get after it every single day if you're going to be successful.
I'm going to introduce you to, because he's got a similar philosophy. Flatbush, yeah, it's a tough neighborhood. I've been there a bunch of times.
But you still here, though. That's good.
They like me in Flatbush. I got the Black Blockchain T-shirt. All right, crypto. How'd you even, kid from Brooklyn down in Florida. I didn't even know they had crypto in Florida. I'm teasing.
Yeah, you're good.
How did you get into crypto?
So getting into the space was really just about financial opportunity, financial freedom. When I was in investments, my last stop in my career, I was a securities trader. So I'm securities licensed 766. I had a $300 million book of business down in Naples that, man, Congress made me sell my book of business. I'm not allowed to be a fiduciary, so I had to sell my book. But my clients would ask me about crypto when Bitcoin was 1,100 a coin. I'm going back then, 600-700 a coin. My clients would ask me, and I'm like, listen, I don't know enough about that space. When I was in the state legislature in Florida, we started talking more about regulatory sandboxes and all the things surrounding fintechs, regulatory sandboxes. Crypto was becoming more of that conversation. In Congress, the way we really get into it is because you're at the epicenter of the regulatory environment in the financial world. The last thing that I want to see is to have, whether it's the CFTC or Treasury or the SEC, lock down the industry with bureaucratic rules that actually limit the capability of smaller, from a financial perspective, investors to be able to get into that space, or smaller innovators from a financial perspective to get into that space. I know people like when Congress regulates on par. They kind of like it. They feel like there's safety, but the safety in a lot of respects is a facade. What the regulatory relations really are barriers to entry. Because if you regulate a space with rules that are too, essentially you're building walls that are too high, and if you don't have the economic capability to just get through the paperwork, and I'm just talking, forget economic capability, it's talking real world. If you don't have the cash to stay afloat long enough to deal with the regulatory hurdles, you can't get into space. And so what cryptocurrency and its whole creation is to get around the regulatory bureaucracy of central banking, because central banks have been manipulating currencies ad nauseum for centuries. This is what central banks largely do, is manipulate currencies. And look, I get it. We love talking about China and how they manipulate their currency. The Federal Reserve does the same thing. That's why the balance sheet's $9 trillion, and a decade ago it was $900 billion. The Federal Reserve does the same thing. So what I don't want to see happen is to see the environment of cryptocurrency be highly regulated for safety concerns, when it actually does, what those safety regulations will do is block entrance for people who do not have the capital base, the cash base to get into that market and make something of themselves, build a business, build wealth for their family, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to see that happen. And then the only way you can really gain access if you're an innovator is some venture capital fund has to basically bless you with the cash to overcome the regulations to be in that space. I think that's bad policy. I think it's bad for the American people overall. We should be inviting more innovation and not crippling innovation with overregulation.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. How long have you been in Congress?
Too long. 20 months now.
All right. Yeah. So
I'm a rookie, man. I'm a rookie.
From afar, it looks pretty goddamn dysfunctional. And so insider's view, is there anything that you see that gives you hope, promise? Like this issue you just hit on, we've been talking about this today. Regulation is coming. It is expensive as heck to run a company like ours. It would be impossible, I think, for small businesses to get engaged. And so constantly asking for some sandbox or some regulatory forbearance on small businesses. Any chance that gets done in the legislation or how people think about it? I mean, the best is just less legislation, less regulation, but.
Right. Well, I mean, first to the dysfunctionality that is Capitol Hill, yeah, that's true. Look, I'm gonna give you a brief tidbit. For all the all the things going on in the economy right now, I'm asking y'all a question. How many hearings are we actually holding about all the various things going on in the economy? Anybody want to guess? 5, man. Woo! You got them rose-colored glasses on, brother. That's nice. 0. Congress is not having any committee hearings on what's actually going on in the economy. 0. I kid you not. Nah, don't be charitable to us because it's ridiculous. Look, I think that Congress, we specialize in 2 things. I tell my colleagues all the time. We specialize in walking. I get about 15,000 steps a day over there. And we specialize in wasting time. And it's really unfortunate. And I think more people need to really understand this. I think that when it comes to the ability of Congress to deal with the regulatory environment, Congress has long since punted so much rulemaking authority to the agencies. So the members, what we end up doing is talking about political topics, and we end up talking about, we need to hold this agency accountable or do this or do that. But Congress doesn't go through the active process of legislating to make sure that the rules of the road are fair for all Americans. We give that to the executive branch and let them do that in their little windmills, which is to the point where I'm coming to about sandboxes and lower regulatory environments. I believe that the future of America's economy is based in regulatory sandboxes, or better put, and I'm sorry, I guess my time's done. No, I'm just playing. Or in an environment where industries become self-regulating industries, and instead of industries having to go to the agencies to comment on the rules that the agencies make and hope that the bureaucrats in the agencies, who for the most part are not on the ground doing the work, please keep that in mind. They've not done the work. They're just commenting on the work from think tanks, lobbyists, etc. That's where they get their information from. So industries should be regulating themselves. The agencies should comment on the rules of the industry. So that way, when the players in the industry, you guys are in it every day, you're far more knowledgeable, you should be able to create rules that make sense for everybody in the industry. And then the agencies, if they feel that the rules are blockading somebody from coming into the industry, or they are set up, they could have the possibility for fraudulent practices or whatever the case might be, then the agency can actually comment on the industry's rule. And then the agencies can also be like, hey, by the way, if you don't fix this, we might have to come bring one of our hammers. But the flow of information is far more superior if the industries regulate themselves, because then or the government then comments on what you're doing, as opposed to you having to come to us and having to basically beg, borrow, and plead, hire some lobby team to hopefully get a meeting with some undersecretary who can get you a favorable ruling on a rule, maybe, because you're not the only one coming in the lobby on that rule. There's probably 100 different groups lobbying on that rule. And buddy down the street who had a relationship with me from way back when we worked on the Hill as staff, I'm going to deal with my homeboy, not you. That's the wrong way to regulate in the 21st century. I think we need to actually flip the entire regulatory environment.
Give me a hand. Give a hand. All right. Two more questions. One is, give us a little bit of your journey to become a Republican. Like, not a lot of guys that grow up in Flatbush end up Republican, at least the ones I've met.
Whoa. I went to school in Flatbush. I grew up in Crown Heights, man. You're going to get me in trouble back home, It's a Brooklyn thing. It's a thing.
All right.
I'm just playing, man. For the cameras, so I got to set the record straight.
Yeah.
The pathway to becoming a Republican? So like I said, I was apolitical, right? So I'm watching the financial collapse happen. I'm watching the proposals coming from D.C. I'm like, that does not work. There were Democrat proposals I didn't agree with. I was like, no, those policies aren't going to work from an economic perspective. Sounds good. Like, that sounds good. But when you put it into actual application, it does not work. And it actually precipitates the very thing you're trying to solve. So from an economic basis, I'm not with that, okay? Like, again, apolitical. My knowledge is economics and finance. So as somebody who does the work and sees the flow of capital, if you tell me this rule is going to make this better for said people, and then I analyze it and realize that actually, no, what it really does is it concentrates more capital at the upper end, then I can't agree with that policy. The mantra during the financial collapse was, and this was, TARP was first and it was the second one, but it was basically, it was a Dodd-Frank. I hate that thing. Thing's awful. Dodd-Frank, what we were told, the American people were told at the time, was we have to prevent too big to fail. That's what the mantra out of Dodd-Frank was. What are the results of Dodd-Frank? The results of Dodd-Frank are that community banking in the United States has decreased by 75%. And that the big banks are bigger. They're massively bigger. And I'm not an anti-big bank guy, but what's happened in the United States is that Bank of America, Citi, JP Morgan, they're massive. They're way bigger now than they were in 2007. And the mom and pop community banks are gone. They were bought up because they can't deal with the regulatory compliance of Dodd-Frank. So if you run a small business in Washington, D.C., if you're a black business owner, what are the odds of you getting a loan from Bank of America versus the community bank down the street because you know the people because they're in your community? This is what I'm talking about. So that was the beginning of my journey. From there, through my reading of political philosophy, not modern politics, because I'll be the first one to tell you, Republicans, well, not me, but my colleagues do a terrible job of actually talking about policies and issues. And there are some that don't understand the entire totality of American life just because they weren't exposed to the whole totality of American life. I have. So I look at things from a different lens. In my readings of political philosophy, what I actually came to find out is I'm actually quite conservative, or what they would call a classical liberal. See, I believe that federal power is actually supposed to be minimal, and that most power is supposed to reside in the hands of states and localities. Why? Because if you need to advocate in your community for a change, it is far better to get it from a state representative or a city council than a member of Congress. If Congress is regulating across the board in every aspect of your life, you will get no relief. Because you have to convince 435 members, you have to convince 218 members, you got to convince 60 senators, people who live in Utah, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, California. Texas. They have different viewpoints and different issues for their states than you have here in Washington, D.C. It's much more better to have a limited federal government and a much more robust local and state government, because then you have more ability to have more control over what's going on in the aspects of your community. That mindset that I'm talking about is the basic mindset of federalism. The basic mindset of federalism is basic conservatism. So I'm a conservative. That's who I am. So when it came to looking at which parties where, that's how I decided to register as a Republican. That's how I became a Republican.
Good answer. This guy's going places. I'm buying futures on him. We're gonna get a token.
You better buy it now. That thing
We're gonna
is
have
heating
a
up.
Byron Donald's token, and we'll trade it. Be a good token.
Hold on, I gotta lay out my congressional disclaimer.
All right, last
I
thing
have
that
no ability or understanding of what this gentleman is talking about with tokens. I am not. I remember from my finance days, you got to disclaim everything, man.
We've asked everyone who's been on stage today to give some advice. We got a lot of students in the crowd, most from Howard. Give it up, and just some advice. Young people getting ready to start their journey. You've had a pretty good start.
The first is don't be afraid to fail. You don't learn anything from success. You learn from failure. That's where you learn it. So don't be afraid to fail. Just go and push it all the way to the limit. When I was running for Congress, we had a phrase on the campaign trail, and it was no stone. And what that means is no stone left unturned. The second thing is, and this is important for, especially in this room, I want to be very clear with y'all. Life is not fair. If you want fair, go get an elephant ear. Elephant ears that's what fairs are about. Life is not fair. Nobody's giving you anything. Nobody. And then let me be blunt on that one. I don't care if you poor growing up black, poor growing up white, poor growing up Latino, nobody's giving you a thing. You have to grind and earn everything in this life. So you can't listen to what people say. You can't be involved in what media is saying right now, because the only thing you can control is you. Everything else, you have no control over that. So if you use your mental and emotional energy to focus on what other people are saying and doing, you already lost. Done. Period. You already lost. Everything is a grind. Everything is a work. It's wake up and work. Period. Every day. I know all the reels now on Instagram, all the motivation dudes be coming through. Listen, I'm as motivated as they come because I'm competitive. Like, I was in a congressional football game last night. I'm sore. I'm competitive, right? But the reason why I've always felt that way is because my mom always told me this. Nobody's giving you anything. You have to go get everything you want in life. And you do that with just keeping your head down, your eyes forward, focus on the target. What am I doing today to go get it done? Last thing, in life, you're going to come to junction points. You know, if you're 20, you'll probably come to 2 or 3 of them before you get to 45. And it's going to be a point in your life where you can go this way or you can go that way. And it's going to be a very distinct choice. And you can decide to take the simple, easy route, which is comfortable, or you can decide to take the road less traveled. Take the road less traveled. One of the guys I love listening to, Colin Cowherd on The Herd, I've been listening to him for years. He gave this comment one day on one of his radio shows, and he said, I always do the opposite of what everybody says. Everybody says, oh, you should only do this. He's like, okay, that's cool. I'm going to go do this. The road less traveled will actually serve you more in the long run. Because in the road less traveled, number one, the people who are around you who aren't on your journey, they leave quick because it's the road less traveled. And then the people you need for the next spot on your journey, you find them on the road less traveled because they're trying to be down that same road as well. So they're committed to their mission and to their journey. And in your journey, you need people around you who have that kind of mindset, who are committed like that. Man, me and my friends, we talk about it all the time. Not everybody travels. Everybody's cool, but not everybody travels. And you got to have people around you who are committed to your journey. And if they're not ready to travel, we can still be cool, but this is the way I'm going. And you have to be confident in yourself, Last bit, I'm a Kobe guy. We're the same age, but I'm a Kobe guy. And I think the one thing, I have it in my office, it's hung up in my office. The first thing I hung in my office is the Mamba mentality. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't read it every day, but it's just basically like, you got to learn to love the hate. You got to learn to love it. Look, I'm a black Republican. I had to learn to just be like, you know what? This is me, and I'm good with it. You got to learn to love the hate. People are going to have opinions, and they should definitely have opinions about you. And they don't hate the good ones. They hate the great ones. So you got to embrace that on your journey. I'm not saying you're trying to be a jerk to everybody, but to follow your dream and to follow your passions, everybody's not going to be for you. And you have to be willing to go through that, work through that, no stone left unturned, take the hard path, really challenge yourself, challenge what you think. And the person you become as the result of that will be far better than the person you are now. I promise you that.
Let's give it up. Thanks so much. It was awesome. All right, you
Wow,
guys can
that
all
was a-
stand up and stretch a little bit.